I'd like to begin by paying my acknowledgement to the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to acknowledge all of you too for sticking around and not sneaking off at afternoon tea. It's really great to see so many faces here for our last session together. I hope it's been a really energising day for you, and I'm hoping that perhaps some of the themes that I might bring to our final conversation together about connection and the importance of really developing and nurturing a sense of belonging in our life is something that relates to us personally, but also in the people that we support too. I guess what really drives me to do what I do is curiosity. I could say lots of things to you about me, but one of them the one that I think really draws me here to you today is that I'm curious about human connection. I'm curious about the way in which connection comes into our life and in which we are able to nurture it and sustain it across the lifespan. It's that curiosity that's been with me through my whole life. And I have lots of experiences personally that for me really just affirm the importance of all of us of having a deep sense of connectedness in our life. And my professional experiences too have led me down a path of spending a good chunk of time over the last 8 years or so working with a range of different resident groups, communities and organisations to really explore how can we support connectedness for individuals and for communities. And I'm not sure if it's just something that I am well attuned to given my curiosities or if it's something that you're picking up on too, but I certainly hear an increasing amount of conversation around social disconnectedness, around social isolation and loneliness. Hearing that talked about as perhaps the greatest public health risk that our society is facing. You might have heard statistics or evidence that compares social disconnectedness to smoking or obesity, some of these things that we perhaps take for common knowledge now as things that have such a significant impact on our physical health, our mental health and our longevity. But really it's social connectedness that is joining that public health conversation too, as something that has such a significant impact on our ability to be healthy, to be well, to live long, happy, healthy lives. It was last year that I was presented with this really incredible opportunity, one called the Westpac Social Change Fellowship, in which I was granted a budget in order to further my own personal and professional learning experience in the space of connectedness. This is an opportunity that Westpac grants to 10 Australians each year. So if you bank with Westpac, I thank you for your contribution to my further learning and development. It was this fellowship that really prompted me to pose two key questions that I think that we as a society really need to be asking. And I've really broken them down here for you. So the first one was, I was interested in exploring what is it that really works when it comes to supporting individuals to develop a sense of connectedness. And secondly, I was interested in exploring what is it that really works when it comes to nurturing a sense of connectedness within a broader community. It was these questions that took me through a planning exercise through which I identified 58 different initiatives around the world that are approaching those questions really thoughtfully, and they've been working really hard for a period of time now to look at how to more effectively support connectedness. I travelled to 14 different locations over 3 months. I covered a lot of ground. And I bet you're getting worried now. You're thinking, oh God, he's going to show off all of his travel photos and that's what we've got for the last hour. Yeah, you should be worried. Don't worry, I won't do too much of that, just a little bit. I went and experienced a whole range of different initiatives. I was really interested in meeting with people across the states who have been setting up these little virtual villages, they call them, where groups of older adults come together and really think about how they can work as a community to support each other to stay healthy and well as they age into their final years. I explored Park Run, which some of you may be familiar with, this model that's really taken off around the world, where a group of people will get together every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock and run, walk or crawl 5 kilometres, just in an effort to connect with each other, invest in their health and support a sense of community. All kinds of different social clubs, social groups, different networks that look at supporting friendship, intimate relationships for people from diverse backgrounds, diverse abilities. I explored the human library, which some of you may be familiar with too, a model that was developed by a group of young people in Denmark who were really interested in how to create and cultivate conversations between people from really different backgrounds that would serve to challenge our preconceived notions and prejudices that we might hold about people who are from a very different lived experience to our own. Met with social justice advocates, researchers, campaigners, a group in Omaha who host these community dinners all over the city that intentionally bring together people from very different backgrounds to have conversations about prejudice, about inclusion, about diversity, about how to support a community that values all people. And then there were a series of initiatives that were different again, those that support, that connected people from different generations through, say, living arrangements like home share, groups that would have dinners that brought together people from different cultural backgrounds to share what culture and family means to them over a meal. Organisations that support people with diverse abilities to develop valued roles in their life, this really positive, affirming identity beyond a disability label. Neighbourhood development initiatives, Skillshare exchanges, time banking initiatives that create really interesting ways in which technology is used to bring together people who might not otherwise meet and share some type of social exchange. And a group in the States that have formed an interfaith community where people from different faith-based backgrounds are now sharing one large common piece of land together, sharing their faith and what God and spirituality means to them through their teachings in each other's spaces in order to cultivate inclusive attitudes. It was through all of these experiences that I guess I met such a wonderful diversity of people, but I wanted to really question, what is it that some of these initiatives are doing that's really working when it comes to supporting people to live connected lives, that's different from those that maybe have an intention to do that, but maybe are struggling a little bit, or maybe are not seeing the same types of outcomes. And in an effort to analyse my experiences and try to make sense of what it is that it's not just what they're doing, but it's how they're doing it. It's what lies beneath the surface there. I took heart from these words by John Cacioppo, who is a neuroscientist who has done a lot of his research in the space of loneliness. In John's studies, and this may really resonate for you, it turned out that feeling lonely was very different from being alone. So he was able to really clearly articulate this difference between feeling alone and being surrounded by other people. Surprisingly, the sensation of loneliness didn't have much to do with how many people you spoke to each day or each week. Some of the people in his study who felt most lonely were actually people who talked to lots of people every day. John says to end loneliness, you need other people. You do need that social, but we need something else too. There needs to be another ingredient there. He said that you also need to feel that you are sharing something with the other person or the group that is meaningful to both of you. You have to be in it together. And it can be anything that you both think has meaning and value. He said that a one-way relationship can't cure loneliness. Only two-way relationships can do that. The loneliness really isn't the physical absence of other people. It's the sense that you're not sharing anything that matters. This perspective from John helped me to shape up a bit of a hypothesis around belonging and how loneliness fits into this piece. I came to see that belonging really has a lot to do with how we are appreciated for our unique self. So when we put our genuine, authentic self forward and that self receives appreciation, that's where we're cultivating that sense of belonging. And I started to see that when initiatives were doing this really well, it was because they were really keyed into thinking about what were the contributions that people might be able to make that others would really appreciate about them. So the types of contributions that people would make when they were not trying to fit in or not trying to please others or do things that others might like, but the types of contributions that just felt like they were authentically them, expressing their unique self. And when that unique self received appreciation, that's when that sense of belonging was really coming through for people. And digging a little bit deeper again, I saw that it was when those contributions were connected to what we might call our innate gifts. So those really intrinsic qualities that a person has, the things that are just so uniquely them. When people are making contributions that stem from those gifts and receive value and appreciation, that's how we're really sowing those seeds of connection. So I really came to appreciate this idea of our gifts being the seeds from which we cultivate meaning and connection in our life. I was interested to see that although this might appear quite logical, and we might understand this to some extent, actually, when I looked around at what a lot of different initiatives were doing, I didn't always see that, and I saw that there were some things that could get in the way. So it was really helpful, I think, to identify and name what these things that can threaten our ability to embrace the gifts in people. Something that our sector has done really well for a long time, with the best of intentions, is that we've focused a lot on the things that people need. And unfortunately, in doing so, sometimes we neglect to focus on those gifts that people have. Sometimes it is those needs that can end up overshadowing the gifts that people that have and bring to their interactions with others. The other thing that can threaten our ability to embrace these gifts is a belief that all gifts have been lost, or perhaps that they were never there in the first place. And lastly, when our helping gets in the way of someone giving their gifts. So we know this is coming from a good place, so we can be forgiving with ourselves when we see this happening, but unfortunately, sometimes our best efforts to help can actually be undermining the opportunities for someone to be making the types of contributions that are going to be really affirming and appreciated by others. These insights took me to a follow-up question. How can we discover, appreciate, and share our innate gifts, especially those of us for whom the world has said, you have no gifts, or for whom circumstance or life is making it a little bit difficult for those gifts to come to the surface? And so I did another trip. I spent a little bit of time in March this year with a man named Bruce Anderson on an island called Vashon, which is just off the coast of Seattle. Bruce has spent the better part of the last 30 years really looking deeply and thoughtfully at this idea of gifts, the gifts that we all have, and working with different communities around the world to support each other to find different ways of identifying and discovering these gifts. I think Bruce has really come to appreciate that although this can be a really strong concept that can offer us so much, that for lots of us that are working in roles where we're with people every day, we have a need to be really practical too. And sometimes it's the practical tools or approaches that can be so important in being able to bring this to life. So Bruce has been working with different communities to develop different types of tools that can really help us to identify and discover and name the gifts that we have. He speaks about gifts as coming across in the literature through all kinds of different sources. So if this is a term that you're already familiar with, it probably wouldn't surprise me all that much, because there's instances of gifts within various different fields of psychology. It's running rife in the community development space right now. So if you're from more of a community development background and you're familiar with asset-based community development and those ideas, you might be familiar with the way in which communities are described as places where there are gifts of abundance and all people carry their own gifts. It comes up in lots of indigenous and ancient cultures around the world that acknowledge that all people are born into the world with gifts, and it is the role of the community to nurture and support the individual, the young person, to develop their own understanding of that gift and find their ways of making contributions to others that are embedded in that gift. But from all of these different sources, the one definition that I've taken away of gifts that I've found to be most helpful is this one. Gifts are the intangible offerings of the heart, mind, body, and spirit that we are compelled to give. Now, one thing that I want to point out to you about this definition is that nowhere in this statement does it say anything about being good at your gifts. And I think that that's a really important learning to take away from this. It's really useful to draw apart and differentiate between our gifts and our skills and our strengths. Because so much of the time, we put a lot of focus on the things that we're good at. We focus a lot on the things that we can do or we've developed an ability to perform well at throughout life, through our experiences. But sadly, we don't necessarily spend as much time focusing on the things that just really light us up, even if we're not actually very good at those things sometimes. Those things are our gifts. And we can absolutely develop a strength in our ability to give our gifts, but that strength doesn't define the gift in and of itself. It's really more about this idea of being compelled to give it, about our gift being really connected to our intrinsic motivations. Learning more about our gifts can be helpful for a number of different reasons. It can give us so much hope. Like when we have an ability to name our own gifts, we can know that we are more than our current situation, and we can know that we as a person are more than a label that might have been placed upon us. That who our identity is very affirmed and enriched by the gifts that we hold. And when it comes to connection, it is through finding the people and the places in which our gifts will be valued and appreciated when we're giving them that we can derive that sense of belonging. For those of us who might hold gifts that are connected to challenging life experiences that we've had, it is through the giving of that gift that not only are we sowing those seeds of connection, but we're also developing some degree of healing from those challenging experiences that we ourselves have faced too. I mentioned that Bruce has developed a range of different tools in order to help people identify their gift. One of those is a core gift interview. So it's a series of structured questions in which two people can work together to identify and name some of the person's gifts. And through that process, condense it down to 2 sentences that really articulate from the individual's words what their core gifts are and how they give them. And this is a sample of some statements that some people have written who participated in these core gift interviews. Another one is these 3 gift buckets where we can look at the gifts of talent. So the things that have always just felt really natural for us, the things that have been easy to learn or we've been really curious about or drawn to throughout our life. We can look at our gifts of wisdom, these really important insights about life or the world or relationships that perhaps have come to us through mentors or influential people in our life, through spirituality or our connection with religion, perhaps through our presence in nature. These really important truths that can act as gifts when they come across through our roles or through our contributions. And these gifts from passages are the things that may have come about for us through these really challenging life experiences. So if I've had an experience in which I've been deprived of a particular basic human need, perhaps that challenging experience has resulted in it becoming so important to me to make sure that others have that in their life. And that is a gift that I can carry. So Bruce says that you can't learn about gifts without doing a little bit of gift discovery work for yourself. So I'm hoping that you've still got a little bit of energy left in you before the day closes out to embrace the vulnerability of a little bit of gift discovery. We're going to practice just using a few different gift discovery questions. And the reason for that is when I've really reflected on these different gift discovery tools that help us to identify and name these gifts, I think I've really started to appreciate that asking really good questions is a way to help us learn more about the things that matter to each other. So I'm going to give you an example of how this might work. So it is a little bit structured. It's a little bit like an interview. So this is something that you'll do in a moment in pairs. So one of you will be interviewed, the other will be the interviewer. So this is an example of how it might play out. So the interviewer might say, if we invited people from all parts of your life into the same room, what's one thing that they'd all agree that you're good at? You might say talking. What's really important here too is this follow-up question. Please don't forget the follow-up question, because this is the question that can really help to unearth and reveal the gift beneath. And that follow-up question is, what's important about that to you? So what is important about talking to you? Your answer might be, it helps people to feel at ease. So that first answer that you gave there, it was an important answer for you, but it wasn't the gift in and of itself. It was something that contained the gift. The gift was actually there in your second answer. So perhaps you do a lot of talking in your day-to-day life because that's your way of helping people to feel at ease. So if that gift that you have is helping people to feel at ease, maybe you bring that out through all of the talking that you do, but I'm sure it comes out in all sorts of other ways as well. So that's what we really want to get to, these gifts that lie beneath, that hold a lot of meaning and significance for you. So we're going to take 10 minutes for this exercise. I've never done this with this many people before, so it could be complete chaos, but that's okay. It'll only be 10 minutes of chaos, so it can only go so far. I want you to pair up with somebody that you feel comfortable having this conversation with. Just a couple of little notes around this. Obviously, with an exercise of this nature, you only share what you feel comfortable sharing. Interviewers, don't unpack the story here. Although that may go against some of your best instincts as people who really love to get to know and discover other people, this is more of a structured interview where what you're really trying to do is get the gift that's beneath the surface here. So this is not the time and the place to unpack the story. If there's some really interesting stuff that comes up, just say, that's great, that sounds so interesting. I'd love to learn more about that. Maybe we can chat about that afterwards and really rein them back in so that you can try and get that gift that lies beneath. And the last thing that I want to say is select one answer. So although that could be really difficult for you, one activity that makes you feel totally alive, focused, and energized, you might start listing off all these different activities that make you feel totally alive, focused, and energized. Just try to choose one. Do that the same for each of these questions, okay? So 10 minutes with a partner. Hopefully that will be enough time to ask a few of these questions to each other and jot down and record what some of those gifts are that were revealed through that process, okay? So if gifts are the seeds of connection, then it's through the contributions that we make to others that we're really sowing those seeds of relationship. So I want to spend just a couple of moments now talking about the power of contribution. Brené Brown uses this analogy of the marble jar, which I really appreciate, as a representation of the connection between two people. So if you imagine that there is a glass jar between you and me, and that glass jar represents the strength of the friendship between the two of us, then every time I make some type of little contribution to you through the course of our friendship together, that's like the metaphorical equivalent of me popping a little marble in that jar. And every time you make some type of contribution to me through the course of our friendship together, that's like the metaphorical equivalent of you popping a little marble into that same jar. So over time, our shared experiences together will result in us popping lots of little marbles in that jar through all of the things that we do for each other, that we value and appreciate for and about each other. And that jar will start to represent the strength of the connection between us. So I think it's a really nice little metaphor that we can use to think about how relationship comes about through all of these little interactions, through the way that we are when we're present with each other, through all of the little tasks that we perform, the little favors that we do, the little acts of kindness and generosity. And it helps us to break something like the concept of relationship down into something that becomes a little bit more tangible. Because when we're really thinking about how do we develop and deepen relationships, that's a really tough question. I think that this analogy can help us a little bit because it can help us to look at questioning what are those little marbles and what might it look like to be putting those marbles in the jar of the people that matter to us. So a little exercise that we've found to be really useful in workshops with different teams and groups of staff or individuals is to choose some different key roles that people have, roles that have some type of relationship component, perhaps as a grandparent or a friend, a neighbour or a volunteer or a member of a different club or group, and to question how can we break that role down into all of these little contributions that somebody might be making to others through their participation in that role. And people come up with all sorts of creative ideas and ways in which they contribute to the people that matter to them in their life. It's a lovely exercise to do. This is just a little example from a workshop where we use those 4 roles just in some slightly more general terms and question what are the types of contributions that somebody might make as a grandparent, a friend, a neighbour, or a member of a different social club. People came up with, say, if we take the grandparent example, people come up with the example like cooking meals or teaching me your favourite recipes, mentoring, playing different types of games, listening, going to the zoo, spending time together, being interested and curious, sharing songs, music, singing together. It's these ways of being able to break down something like that role into all of these little components and little experiences that happen through that role that I think can really help us to appreciate and consider what is our role as a supporter. Because when things might become a little bit difficult for somebody in life based on circumstance or situation or ability, and perhaps the ability to perform some of these types of tasks independently diminishes, then a really important question that we need to be asking ourselves as supporters is how can we support these contributions? So not how can we just support someone to be independent and do all of the things that they need to do every day to get by, but if we really appreciate and acknowledge the importance and significance that relationships have in somebody's life, in living a happy, meaningful, enjoyable, fulfilling life, and we appreciate that relationships come about through all of these little contributions that someone makes to the people that matter to them, then as a supporter, it's these types of contributions that we might be able to support in some way, shape or form with the individual so that these relationships can not only be maintained but can continue to be fulfilling and meaningful. So I want to show a little video with you now. This is an example from a group called Java Memory Care that have developed a really creative way of applying some of this thinking around the importance of role and the contributions that people make in a peer support context. So they have a bit of a story to tell about the power of people with dementia being able to make valued contributions to others who have a lived experience of dementia too, to their peers. And there's some really lovely ways that notion of peer support can be brought to life. So I'm going to share this with you now, but I'd really encourage you to be paying attention to all of those little contributions that people are making that might be really stemming from their innate gifts.
Beautiful. Look at that smile. Java Memory Care is an activity program that cultivates peer support and emotional engagement among residents living with moderate to advanced cognitive impairment. It is an adaptation of the Java Music Club. And the reason that we want to cultivate peer support is that when residents are passive recipients of care, when they don't have opportunities to contribute, to give back to their community, they suffer. Emotionally, socially, spiritually, physically, and mentally.
We've been using the Java Music Club program for over 4 years. We really decided to make it the anchor program. How do you get neighbors helping one another, coming to know one another on a more intimate level so it really feels like a neighborhood? That's why we decided that Java Music Club would be perfect, and we've now started running Java Memory Club 2 to 3 times a week. So building on the Java Music Club and branching out into Java Memory Care as well.
We're a society, we want to connect with others, and we have to find a way to connect with these folks with advanced dementia. And some of them are very, very challenging.
I really think Java Memory Care is different for our folks with advanced dementia Because of the emotional engagement, the opportunity to look in each other's eyes, the smiles, the participation that comes from them during the program, it's not a passive program. They are engaged, emotionally engaged with one another, with the facilitator, as helpers as well. So there's engagement on lots of different levels, and that can be really challenging in a program with lower functioning folks.
For me, when you bring them in, they might be in a sleep, they might be in their own world, and once you bring them together and they gather them together, and you put the music, the relaxation music on, and you're starting to see this dynamics happening, and they're starting to waken up, and they have a smile, they listen to music, so they give the couple tunes. So what means to me is that even if you lose your sight or you lose in the cognitivity, you have your soul. You have, there is still, they can feel you, they can feel your energy.
What really stands out for me is the way people with very advanced dementia can still take on the role as a helper. They can help by welcoming, the hand over handshake, I love that. That's so important to start a program that way. They can help, they can be the song leader, maybe the hugger for the day. But there's always a role that someone can help with, no matter where they are in their dementia journey.
Hello.
In the Java Memory Care, having another elder helping another elder out is really nice to see, because you're giving that elder a purpose and some meaningful work to do. So you give her a role to helping out another person, and that makes them feel good about themselves. This lady that I had as my assistant, she would be withdrawn from all the programs. She wouldn't come to anything, she declined. But now we're giving her a purpose, and I've never seen her like this before. It definitely, she feels like she's got a role and a purpose now to help us out.
I saw that in the last program where I have this handheld wind chime, and I gave it to my assistant, and so he was holding it while the other resident was doing one by one. And there was this moment on these two, like the world, everything else was gone, and these two residents were connecting. It was beautiful, and that's what you can actually create it in Java Memory Care.
That was amazing. I watched Sally sit within that program and not get up once because she was fully engaged, even though Sally has very advanced dementia.
The thing is, this elder didn't have anything to do. She's just like in front of the TV, watching TV, and she's not engaged. And so when this elder is in my program, she seems to be engaging, and she like look each other and just being around with each other. As you can see, her eyes is just looking to each one of us, and in that way she communicates to everybody here.
Research is demonstrating that those living with advanced cognitive impairment are immensely capable of helping one another when we put the right supports in place. And that is what Java Memory Care is all about.
These folks are based in British Columbia, and there may be some contextual differences there, but I think there's some really nice little moments in there that we can appreciate about those little contributions that people are making to others, that are just those little ways of sowing the seeds of connection with other people around them. I'm going to finish up at this point so that we can save some time for any questions or further discussion that we wish to have. But I guess to close, I'd really encourage you to take away this perspective about our gifts being the seeds from which we cultivate meaning and connection in our life. And I'd really encourage you to think about how can you go about really seeking to discover and unearth the gifts of the people that you support. Perhaps it's through the questions that you ask or the things that you observe or appreciate, the conversations that you have with family or other significant others about the things that have mattered to people throughout their life that aren't just the things that they're good at, or the things that they might be able to do, or the needs that they have, but the things that really light them up. And what is it that others appreciate, and how can you be a role that can really support those gifts to be sown through the contributions that people make in their roles as a family member, as a friend, a neighbour, or a member of a different club or a community.